One of the famous quotes of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune that truly speaks to her legacy: you just do what you have to do. We welcome you back to this conversation. We're talking about the life and legacy of civil rights activist and educator, esteemed educator, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Her granddaughter, Dr. Evelyn Bethune, is the author of the Bethune Blueprint, and we left off talking about the networking that she did to make sure, in simple terms, make sure her babies could have access to money and the resources needed. How did she?
And it took money and resources.
Yeah.
Many times people came to her. Their parents didn't have any money. Mm-hmm. And so she was charging $5 a week.
Wow.
That was like $1 million for some people. So they raised money. They spent time on the beach side. She met the Roosevelts. She met the Franklins, the Mr. White, who owned White Sewing Machine Company, Mr. Rosenbaum, who started the Rosenbaum schools. They all spent time in Daytona Beach and Ormond Beach. And so she took her students on the beach. Mm-hmm. They sang, they sold sweet potato pies, they did a host of things. But while they were doing that, she was networking. She was taking the room, she was
and
talking
basically
to people.
Making the case, here's why you need to invest. This
Telling
wasn't a
them the
woman
dream.
who was begging. This
Not
was
at
a
all.
woman who was making the case for what was going on in the country and why it was important to invest in the future.
Mr. White said that he thought the school was already in existence because she painted the picture so clearly. And he wrote her a check for $10,000. $10,000 in 1904 was $1 million investment. And so she took a garbage dump, and it is now one of the second largest landholders in Volusia County. Has, almost 4,000 students, starting with 5 girls and my dad. But she also, in the meantime, was building these relationships. And people would call her. They would come to see her. They would talk to her. And she met Eleanor Roosevelt on a trip to Washington to do a radio
when
show.
You had Eleanor Roosevelt's ear, you had
Absolutely,
access.
she had the president.
I want to talk to you about, as we look at some pictures of you with, I think we just saw John Lewis there, the statue of your grandmother in Florida.
Yes.
I wonder what goes through your mind when you look at the changes in policy as it relates to what's being taught in schools, what can be taught, the change in the curriculum, and what she would have thought of what we're seeing in some Florida public schools now.
Well, think about this. Someone just sent me a picture of a permission slip in order for a student to be able to read or be read to out of a book written by a Black author about Black history, African American history, which is American history. My grandmother fought so that we could have the basic rights of being able to read and write. And those are the kinds of things that we don't want to talk about. How do we not repeat the errors of the past if we're not going to teach the impact of that history?
Right, and how we got here.
Absolutely. And so today we're rolling back the clock. We're banning books. That's not something you do in a free nation. That's not democracy. When a governmental agency decides what I can read or not. And so if you don't tell the whole story, then you get to tell the piece that you want people to hear. And no one gets to make a decision based on the facts. And so that's what is happening.
And
right
how is
now.
that impacting the colleges? How is that impacting Bethune-Cookman University?
They're determining what goes on in those classrooms as well. Fortunately, Bethune-Cookman is a private institution. However, we still get governmental funding.
Right.
And so there are certain things that cannot be talked about or promoted because it's seen as going against the laws that are being put in place.
Because it risks the funding?
Absolutely.
So technically you could continue on that course, but
80% of the student body at Bethune-Cookman gets some type of financial aid from the state of Florida and through the federal government. And so they have to be very cautious about how they walk that line. So
I can't imagine your grandmother ever
that would not be in her approval list. And it is, I don't believe it's something that she would do. She would find another way.
Yeah.
Because she believed in freedom and the ability to be self-determining.
Can we talk about, just in this minute that we have left, and again, we'll pick it up on the other
Yes.
side, her role as an activist for military personnel? I don't think people spend a lot of time talking about that. I want to get to that on the other side because she did so much work in terms of policy change.
Yes.
And the role of women in the military that I think it's just not as big of a conversation, right?
Well, she understood that if we wanted the face of the nation to change, you had to change policy. And so those were the conversations she had with the presidents. And those were the things that she worked towards. The Black cabinet was put together by Mary McLeod Bethune. She was the only female on the cabinet. And that was an advisory group that the president went to about the state of affairs for his Black citizens. And so she said, well, you know, we have to integrate the military. That's not an option.
Right. When we get back, we're going to
Yes.
talk about how she helped influence that integration. Wow. Just such a powerful woman. Your DNA is
Very
strong, sis. That's a
forward-thinking.
beautiful thing. Yes, indeed. All right. We have talked about the grit, the fortitude, the accomplishments. But when we return, Dr. Evelyn Bethune shares some words of wisdom passed down from her beautiful grandmother. Stay with us. They're words we can all live by.